Hi everyone, I'm Anima Nair, lead client management and content strategy at Neurogifted, where we work with all things neurodiversity related. I'm also the former co-founder director of Sense Kaleidoscopes, an academy right here in Bangalore, where I worked with children and young adults who are autistic for more than 10 years. I'm also the proud parent of an autistic young man who also happens to be an incredible artist and whose neurodivergence we celebrate every day. I'm happy to be speaking at the Neurodiversity India Summit 2022 on a topic that's very close to my heart: how to be a good neurodiversity ally. So, who is an ally? Before I answer this question, since we are talking about neurodiversity allyship, let me first just quickly explain what neurodiversity is. Neurodiversity is a concept that there is a natural variation in human brains. So no two brains are alike, and all brains have their strengths, they have their challenges. Conditions like autism, ADHD, dyslexia, dyscalculia, dyspraxia, Tourette's, etc. are conditions that come under the umbrella of neurodiversity. Individuals whose brains are different from the norm or the typical or the majority are called neurodivergents, or NDs for short. 20% of the world's population comprises neurodivergent individuals, and therefore we simply have to understand the importance of neurodiversity in our lives. Neurodivergence manifests in different ways. No two neurodivergent individuals will manifest their neurodivergence in exactly the same way. It's important to keep that in mind. An ally is commonly defined as someone who helps and supports other people who are part of a group that is treated badly or unfairly, although they are not themselves a member of that group. To become a neurodiversity ally would therefore mean that you support neurodivergence while not being so yourself. For example, I'm a neurotypical. I identify as a neurodiversity ally because I have been working with and supporting neurodivergent children and young adults for many years. I also speak and write on this topic extensively, and that is why I call myself a neurodiversity ally. So now let's talk about why allyship is important. Allyship is important for many reasons. Allyship can foster authentic inclusivity because it creates a workplace and culture where employees are less likely to feel isolated and on the margins. Allyship also creates a better culture by including everyone in the conversation and action of inclusion. Good allies, for instance, can drive workplace policy. They can initiate culture change. If an organization's senior leadership believes in allyship and actively pursues neurodivergent friendly actions as allies, neuroinclusion happens almost effortlessly. Now, if you want a non-workplace reason for why allyship is important, I could simply say that it is being human. It is the right thing to do. And having said that, all of the tips and the points that I'm going to be covering today, most of it can be applied outside the workplace context as well. So while I'm talking primarily about neurodiversity allyship in the workplace, there are a few points that you can take home and apply on a day-to-day basis. Now, being a good neurodiversity ally. I get asked this question a lot. How do I start? What are the ways in which we can become good neurodiversity allies? Allyship begins with knowing what is going on in your workplace and working to make needed changes. let's take a look at the different ways in which we can become neurodiversity allies in the workplace. So firstly, we all have to learn. The first thing you can do is educate yourself about neurodiversity. There's plenty of information out there. Take the time to read, to listen, to watch, and to improve your understanding. Don't put the responsibility on your neurodivergent colleagues or employees to teach you about themselves or neurodivergence in general. When you need to ask questions about the challenges faced by individual neurodivergence, do so with consideration and sensitivity. Also, it's good to keep in mind that experiences vary from one neurodivergent individual to another. So try to keep from generalizing based on just one or two accounts. No two neurodivergent individuals have the same set of strengths and challenges. Every neurodivergent individual is also neurodistinct. It's important to keep this in mind so that as allies, we continue to learn and also educate others about neurodiversity. Don't assume. I know it's something that most of us easily fall prey to. It's easy to assume any number of things based on observed behavior without understanding the underlying causes or triggers for those behaviors. For example, if you see someone having a meltdown without understanding the series of events that led to that meltdown, you are likely to assume that it's just bad behavior or maybe an irrational response to some seemingly trivial trigger. The truth is that the neurodivergent individual having a meltdown may have been under a lot of stress for any number of reasons. It could be sensory overwhelm. It could be bullying in the workplace. It could be not being able to meet a deadline. And the inconsequential trigger that you saw, that you observed, would have been the last straw. So it helps to understand that some brains work differently. So assuming incompetence or aggression where they are not applicable is a sure way to cause neurodivergence to feel the pain of exclusion and the pain of being misunderstood. So there's a simple way to work around this. When you do not know, just ask. Or just be supportive regardless. Always believe in positive intent rather than assuming negative motivations. Right, so now let's talk about using direct communication, why it's so important, why it's crucial to use direct communication. A good ally ensures that they use simple, direct, clear communication. Neurodivergents often cannot pick up on body language, on nuances. They can't read between the lines. So say what you mean. Also, using phrases such as, "that's not my cup of tea," or "that was a slam dunk," all of those, they can be confusing because many times neurodivergents tend to be quite literal, and such phrases, they're just better avoided. Now make sure you speak clearly and that you are understood. Clarity is important, especially when giving instructions. It's easy to be overwhelmed while listening to multiple instructions when you're a neurodivergent. So start with the person's name so that they know you are addressing them. Just don't take it for granted that they know you're talking to them. Avoid abstract or generic terms. Keep instructions short and precise. Also prioritize them in order of importance. Give your neurodivergent colleagues or employees the time to process information, so you have to be patient. Now, while being direct can be helpful, you also need to judge the situation. If a neurodivergent colleague seems unduly stressed or anxious, then it is best to avoid demanding language, such as using words like must or now. Like, for instance, if you say, you must complete this project now, or I need this document now. So that tends to stress the person further. So it's important to analyze the context before applying direct communication. Teach others the importance of using direct communication when interacting with neurodivergents, because as part of our role as allies, this is an important part of our role as allies, that we teach others as we go along in this journey. Now, here is one of the most crucial aspects of being a neurodiversity ally, which is using inclusive language. Now, the ability to use inclusive language is important, but also the willingness to learn and to continue to use inclusive language is important. So, inclusive language, it improves communication and can make everyone in the workplace, not just neurodivergents, feel accepted and understood. The right language plays a fundamental role in shaping the right culture. Words are important. Be careful to avoid ableist language in all its forms and explain to others why avoiding ableist language is respectful to neurodivergence. Ableism is simply the discrimination against anyone with a physical or mental disability. Let me give you a few examples here of what ableist language looks like. For instance, words such as crazy or bonkers, they're ableist because they perpetuate the notion that psychological disability is so bad, it's so horrible, that it can be used as an insult. Instead, try to use words like overwhelming or ridiculous, maybe, instead of using words that are associated with mental illness. Another example of ableist language is saying you feel crippled by the amount of work you need to do. Just say you feel completely stuck, or you feel frozen by the amount of work you have to do in such a short period of time, or any such neutral language. It's hard to get it right all the time because a lot of such words are used frequently and it's just part of our everyday language. So you will not get it right all the time, and that's all right. But you will get more conscious and therefore more sensitive of your words as you continue to use only inclusive language. Now, let's talk a little bit about ensuring that workplaces are inclusive. Making workplaces inclusive involves a lot of things. Many elements are part of this. Allies should ask for workplace accommodations for neurodivergence. But the best way to make sure that workplaces are inclusive, it's by providing every employee, and not just neurodivergent employees, the option to ask for workplace accommodations. Make the environment feel like a safe space so that anyone can approach you with the requirements that they need in order to just do their work better. So this takes away any stigma or discomfort that neurodivergents would experience in asking for accommodations that simply help them to do their jobs, in a comfortable way, in a way that they know that they can handle. And the accommodations we're talking about here, they're not luxuries. They're actually absolutely essential for neurodivergents to be able to perform or execute their jobs. Now, many neurodivergents have sensory processing issues, and noisy, overly bright environments are difficult for them to handle. So give them choices, whether it is a venue for a meeting, for instance, do they have the right kind of lighting? Is it fluorescent lighting or soft lighting? Because fluorescent lighting tends to be very difficult for neurodivergents to handle, many of them, in fact, to handle sensorially. Now, also think about the layout. Is it an easy to navigate layout? Are there enough directions? And so on. During a meeting, think about offering flexibility in terms of contributing ideas so that there are multiple options. For instance, verbal, non-verbal, synchronous, asynchronous options. This makes neurodivergents feel like they're also being considered and that they have a chance to contribute because they want to contribute, but restricting the mode of contribution is always going to keep them back a little bit. Now, simply asking your neurodivergent colleagues about the preference for online or offline meetings, that's also a great way to go. These are all simple ways to make sure you champion the need to make the workplace more inclusive. So, how about accepting feedback? That's a bit tricky. It's always difficult for most of us, to accept honest feedback. So be open to accepting feedback in a positive manner. To get honest feedback, it is first necessary to establish trust. And building relationships is a good way to establish that trust. Open and direct feedback may seem a little difficult to accept initially, but as an ally, your role would be to analyze what your neurodivergent colleagues or employees are trying to tell you and listen so you can figure out how you can better support them. And now, here's another tricky point. Be aware of your privilege. What is privilege? Privilege refers to the advantages enjoyed by a group beyond what's available to others. Non-disabled privilege is having the world accommodate and validate your way of being. For example, I have different kinds of privilege. I have the privilege of coming from a strong economic background. I have the privilege of a good education. I have the privilege of being non-disabled. I have the privilege of being able to communicate without difficulty. All of us have multiple privileges that we are not consciously aware of. We take this for granted. Knowing that we have been afforded rights and advantages because of our neurotypical privileges is a vital step towards being a good ally. It also gives us a sense of what neurodivergents are denied access to. To best support neurodivergence, you must be able to see and address the barriers that they face as individuals with less privilege in the workplace on a day-to-day basis. Now, understand how you can use your advantage, your positional advantage, to better drive impactful allyship. Reporting unacceptable behavior, such as bullying, microaggressions, gaslighting, or any such behavior, is a crucial part of being a good neurodiversity ally. Bullying at work means harassing, offending, socially excluding someone, or negatively affecting someone's work tasks. Workplace bullying has a huge impact on neurodivergence. Anxiety, increased stress, these are all common results of bullying, which makes it difficult for the affected employees to perform their tasks effectively. Some examples of bullying are spreading malicious rumors or gossip, excluding or isolating someone socially, not inviting them for meetings or not inviting them for gatherings and so on. And also all kinds of intimidation. Microaggressions are slightly different. A microaggression is a statement or action that conveys indirect, subtle, or unintentional discrimination against members of a marginalized group. In many cases, microaggressions can be difficult to pinpoint and resolve because it is subtle rather than outright or obvious. And to be honest, in some cases, microaggressions are unconscious behaviors. Few examples. A co-worker telling a neurodivergent employee, "You don't look autistic," or judging a neurodivergent individual as incompetent when they take longer to process questions and formulate responses, and then ignoring their input and treating them as if they were invisible. All of these are very painful experiences for neurodivergence. Gaslighting is a form of psychological manipulation. Gaslighting at work is when a colleague or manager invalidates what you know to be true, forcing you to question yourself and your ability to do your job. Now, all of this may happen in the workplace, in certain workplaces, to just about any employee. But neurodivergents are particularly vulnerable to such behavior. So when you see instances of bullying or gaslighting or microaggressions or any kind of discrimination in the workplace, do remember that those at the receiving end may not be in a position to, or they may not feel safe enough to talk about this to anyone. They may end up not getting the help they need. So speak up whenever you see such behavior in the workplace. Monitoring your workplace for such actions and reporting them is a big part of being a neurodiversity ally. So how can neurodiversity allies also advocate for diversity? So how can you advocate for diversity and be a stronger neurodiversity ally? Raise awareness about neurodiversity and the need for diverse perspectives around the workplace. You could use data to make better arguments. There are so many studies and statistics that show why neurodiversity is great for business. Talk about the correlation between neurodiversity and increased productivity, increased innovation, better resilience that you get in a neurodiverse organization. Talk about how empathy in dealing with neurodiversity makes for better managers. Talk about the enrichment that comes from neurodiversity. Make it clear that you support neurodiversity by talking about the benefits of having a neurodiverse workforce. For example, insist on hiring from the neurodivergent community for certain job roles and change processes to better attract, hire, and retain neurodivergent talent. Amplify the efforts of neurodivergents who want their voices heard, who want a place at the table. Our last point here is building a community of allies, because no one can do this alone. Bring together groups of like-minded colleagues and employees and enlist them in the cause of neurodiversity. Create employee resource groups or business resource groups so that neurodivergents have safe spaces within the organization to talk about their needs and how the environment in general can be made more inclusive. How can they be supported in their work? Arrange for talks or workshops by neurodivergents who have been through this journey and who can share valuable learning. This will help create more allies and also enlarge the ally community within your workplace. Working together, you can formulate tactics to better drive improvements when it comes to neuroinclusion in the workplace. I will leave you with this quote. True allyship demands that it move from conversation to action. Learning to be a good ally takes time. It also takes work to deal with biases and lack of understanding regarding neurodiversity. Be prepared for resistance to the idea of allyship at different levels, but don't let it deter you. Take the help of experts who can facilitate the process of creating allies in the workplace. There is really no shame in asking for help. The most important thing that you have to remember is, while talking is good, it's far more crucial to take action. Thank you so much.